This is the Data Privacy Detective. Now, today we're going to talk about Google and third party apps and privacy. Now, let me jump right into it. A good friend who is really a leading international expert about data provenance wanted to connect with me and sent me a Calendly, Calendly, invitation, which is a way of checking when our calendars can get together. And there's certainly efficiency in doing that. And sure, happy to do that. So now I'm in the Google world, and so I through Google got a message and started clicking through, and up pops this screen. And here's what it says: it says Calendly wants to access my Google account at my Google email. And it says this will allow Calendly to, I'm quoting, see, edit, share, and permanently delete all the calendars that I can access using Google Calendar. Whoa, wait a minute here now. From a privacy perspective, Calendly, that let's just say I've heard of it, but I don't pay money to it. It's not a person, it's a company. Allow it to see, edit, share, and permanently delete everything in all my calendars? Well, I'm a lawyer. A lot of that's very confidential information with client names and dates and so on. Just the calendar. Whoa, is what I immediately reacted. And then Google says, now make sure you trust Calendly. You may be sharing sensitive information with it. Well, that's for sure. And it says, oh, here, you can learn about how Calendly will handle your data by reviewing its, not Google's, Calendly's terms of service and privacy policies. Click there. And of course, you can always see or remove access in your Google account. Well, okay, hold on. I'm going to take you on a little tour now. So now we'll stay with Google and what it tells us. And this isn't just about Calendly, a very well recognized company with a lot of users. This is about third-party apps, and then we will allow them to interact with our communication system, whether it's Google or Microsoft or whatever it is. They're going to come in, and your data, our data, is going to be shared. So what does Google tell you about this? If you're in the Google world, it tells you your privacy is important to Google. Well, I believe that. Google spends a fortune on privacy matters. And it says when you sign in with Google, which is a way to do it easily with an app, you can then easily and securely, Google tells us, sign into third-party apps using your Google account. And it tells you, of course, these third parties are not Google, they're third parties. So keep in mind that the data that Google shares with the third parties now going to be held by not just Google, but with the third party. Okay, we get that. And it says that Google won't share your Google account password. Well, that's a good thing with a third party. Shouldn't do that. Then it tells you that this data is really always shared when you sign in with Google. Your name, your email address, and your profile picture. So that's going to go to any third party that you allow to use the Google account to sign in. And it says that's only shared after you get permission, meaning if you don't want to connect the app, okay, fine, you don't have to use it. But if you do, you can't exclude those three pieces of data that I just mentioned. And then it tells you the third party might request further access to some of your Google account data. Well, in Calendly's case, apparently it could see, share, and delete all of my calendar information. That's the way Google's worded it. Well, then Google tells you how you can share information and basically tells you go to the third-party app, make sure it's trustworthy, and look at its privacy policy. We're going to do that with Calendly in just a bit. Google tells you, well, before you give access to your Google account data, it tells you that that third party may read, edit, delete, or share sensitive information, not just those three things I mentioned. So you better go read the privacy policy and security disclosures for the third-party apps that we're talking about. And it warns that the third-party app server might be breached. Unauthorized people may access that data. Somebody at the third party, an individual, may look at it within that third-party company. It warns you Google can't protect the data that's on somebody else's servers. And so you've just increased your data security and privacy risk by taking that data and sharing it with somebody else who may share it with somebody else, and so on. It tells you the third-party app could misuse or share your data inappropriately. Don't blame Google if that happens. It tells you that you may not be able to quickly automatically delete your data from their servers. You're going to have to deal with them. Don't just call Google and complain about it. So, this is what's happening, that as soon as you, for convenience, say, oh, sure, let's sign up through Calendly and get our calendars together, something more than that has happened. And then Google warns you for unverified apps. There are startup apps. After all, companies start small and grow as big as Calendly and other ones become recognized. Be careful with those. A developer may be testing it. There can be people trying to steal information in startups. Watch out about that. And then it tells you can always review or change your Google account, but it warns you once you've released data to a third party, don't blame Google. Don't ask Google to go get it back, because that's not going to happen. Goodness, I'm concerned still without looking at Calendly yet in our example. It tells you that Google, too, is going to now have access to how you use this third-party account, this app you've brought into the Google world. Telling you, for example, you could ask your Google Assistant to turn smart light bulbs on or off. Goodness. Well, how long is your data shared? Well, the third party may share data as long as you have an active link between your Google account and the third party account, and then dependent on the third party for data that it's already received. Well, it was time, I think, to look at Calendly's privacy notice. Well, I had used Calendly once before, and so I was already linked. I was on the approved list of third-party apps. I found out I had 14 of them that I had approved for use with Google. But this time I looked for the privacy notice. I went to Calendly.com, and it took me immediately to the app with no reference to a privacy notice or policy or anything else. And so I had to take a couple steps to actually get to the privacy notice, but I got there. So let's go through it. Now, this is the April 15th, 2024 version. And of course, these things are always updated by companies, as they should be, to conform with laws that are evolving very quickly. And what does it tell you? Well, Calendly tells you that it encourages you, all of us, to supply only necessary information, meaning name, email, address, date and time. Date and time, of course, for a calendar scheduler is critical. And it's not usable by persons under 18 because of laws protecting minors. And Calendly tells you, and it says, now this is interesting if you read it, in most instances, great words, aren't they? Our calendar integration only uses and displays the duration and free busy status of the events in your calendar so that we don't book you when you're busy. Well, that's the whole purpose of using it. In most instances, remember, were the first three words. It says a few of our features use and display meeting titles in the calendar. It says in all cases, no details about the appointments in your connected calendar are stored in Calendly, such as who you are meeting with, their email address, or the meeting title. That is reassuring. But then it tells you that although connecting your calendar to the services makes the scheduling process more efficient, you're not required to connect your calendar. Well, meaning it's your choice if you want to have Calendly have access to your information. Then it tells you meeting information. If you participate in a recorded virtual meeting, they're going to collect a recording of the meeting, which isn't obvious to someone who may just be setting a calendar date using Calendly. Interesting, even though the host for the session may be using Calendly, but now you're being recorded, and you may not be aware of that unless you read the privacy policy of Calendly, and Calendly will have that. It says that Calendly and authorized third parties use cookies and other technologies, including local storage, to receive and store certain types of information when you interact through your computer or mobile device. And that helps Calendly customize its experience, improve user experience, and so on. And then it gives a list of all sorts of information that it's going to collect for this purpose, which now I'm a little more concerned that it's not just to make sure my calendar's free. Lots being collected and thought about. And then it says we can disclose, the Calendly can disclose information to third parties or allow other third parties to directly collect information on Calendly's website, such as social media companies and advertising networks and so on. Well, that's not something I thought I was buying into to set up a calendar meeting with my friend. And then it says, well, Calendly is going to use my information to provide its services to me. Well, didn't really ask for it except to do this. Of course, it's helping me set up a time if I choose to use it. And it says that Calendly can share information collected about me in various ways. It listed as to government, for example, it says that they may share my data if they believe, not me, that disclosure is reasonably necessary to comply with a law, regulation, legal, or governmental request. So I guess if anybody wants in government wants to know something about me, they can just request it, and Calendly will give it to them if they want to. Now it does say that Calendly will let me know that disclosure has come in. And it says I can opt out of promotional emails from Calendly. Well, here's this opt-out problem, isn't it? It says I can opt out of Google Analytics on Google's website. And then this is really quite interesting and important. You can tell this with privacy policy is written by lawyers, which you would expect, of course. Depending on where you live, you may have the following rights subject to applicable exemptions or limitations, and a whole string of rights are listed, but they're only depending on where you live. So if you live in California, there are certain rights you have, and they list that. If you live in the European Union, well, that's different, and they have certain rights. And if you live in a state that doesn't have a code and it's not subject to federal laws about financial information or health information, I guess they can do whatever they want. That's kind of what it tells you, that on this point, because depending on where you live in a state that doesn't have a law, and we don't yet have a comprehensive U.S. federal data privacy code, that you don't have any of the rights that they've listed. Well, that tells you a lot about where we are in the data privacy world. We don't have, even in the United States, a comprehensive data privacy code. States are about a third of the states as of mid-2024 have somewhat comprehensive codes now. Federal codes are still being debated in Congress. And I came to the conclusion that Calendly, like many other third-party apps, are trying to be free to do what they want to do with our information unless we opt out, and even then it's not all that specific on some points. If the laws where I reside don't protect my personal information. And so opt-outs are required rather than opt-ins. Even there, we're not clear within GDPR. They may not be required if there's legitimate interest to collect information. And let's get away from Calendly for a minute, because I am not picking on them in any way. This is an example we're talking about. It's not just if a third-party app is trustworthy or something I've heard of. We want the convenience, in the Calendly case, of scheduling a meeting with someone without a lot of back and forth and trouble. Understood. That's a valuable service. So it's not just whether it's trustworthy. It's what is a third party then going to do with our information that we really haven't thought to restrict? Are we supposed to go to each third party app and read their privacy policy the way I did? Between Google and Calendly, that probably took me a good hour or so to read it carefully. Do you all really want to do that with your time? Why don't we have privacy by design instead? It's the architecture of how data is shared that is so important. And why don't companies choose to design architecture that don't rely just on whatever the law requires in a particular state or country? Why not have a consistent, you have the following rights if you deal with us? I wish more companies would think that way and write their policies that way. I mean, why shouldn't an app that does a particular thing insist only on receiving and sharing information that's needed to make that app work, rather than collecting stuff that it can then share with other people for a variety of purposes and be subject to all the risks of having that information? This is kind of a status report on what's happening to our personal information in the absence of clear standards, at least private sector standards, for what apps should do and shouldn't do if they'd like to be thought of as privacy centric. It's something that legislators in each country and each state can think about what they require. Why not privacy by design? And when we make choices of what third-party apps to connect to our Google account, if that's how we do it, or other accounts, we have choices to make. And if we don't make them, our data will be shared and will be used and will be subject to further risks as it gets expanded across the universe of data. As always, I'll close this session by reminding us all this. Well, just before I do, when the internet was created, we often called it the web, the World Wide Web. Well, the web should not be a spider trap with our personal information as spider food. And so I will conclude, as I always do, dear listeners, reminding us all protecting your personal information begins with you.